Good evening. I think I am standing between you and your freedom. So I'm sure you're all waiting for me to wrap up quickly, but I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to ask Margarita from Hewlett Foundation to just get everyone a bit energized. We actually have a very short session. We're waiting for our speaker, Harsha Kumar, who is the AVP of Product at Ola, to join us, and she seems to have gotten lost. So I have a few minutes to talk, but I thought I'd get Margarita, get you a bit excited. Do you need a mic?
All right, I can shout. Can you hear me? Okay. We're going to do an exercise. I know Joe asked me because I'm very energetic. So I need everybody to stand up right now. Stand up. Stand up. All of you, do you know how to count backwards? Yes. Okay, so we're going to start counting backwards from number 6 down to number 1. And the exercise consists of this. We have to do it every single extremity. With our arms, this is my right, my left, my right, and left. And we're going to do it all together. We're going to make it very loud, okay? Ready? Yes. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, right? Okay, now faster. Faster and faster. Okay. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 1, 1, 1, 1.
I had a great view of you guys going through that. That was very entertaining for me. I did do it. You guys were so highly concentrating you didn't see me. Thank you, Margarita. That was brilliant. All right. So I am actually going to start with a thought experiment that I have completely stolen from a blog called, I've forgotten the name of the blog, but I've stolen it from a blog called Wait But Why. Okay, so I want you all to close your eyes, please. And I want you to think about if we were to bring in a person today into this conference room, if we were to bring in a person from 1857, I see lots of eyes still open. Shut your eyes. Okay, thank you. Okay, if we were to bring in someone into this room from 1857, what sort of experience would they have? Well, so the blog talks about how this person would probably have a heart attack, right? They'd see electricity, they'd see this text written up on a screen, they'd see these cameras pointing, they'd see my image on that screen. How is this happening? You know, the change would just be too much for them to understand, and they would have a very hard time accepting it. Now keep your eyes shut. Now we're going to time travel a bit. We're going to pretend like we are actually in 1857 ourselves, right? We are residents of 1857. What's happening around us? You know, there's clearly a fight against the British going on in India, but try to think about what your surroundings are. Do you have electricity? Do you have a phone? And you know the answers. Do you have a car? You know the answers to all of this. Now, if we were to go back 160 years, the way we did from 2016 to 1857, if we went back another 160 years, so to 1697, would we have a heart attack bringing someone from 1697 to 1857?
No.
No, right? Who said that? Dario. Okay, and that's because not too much changed between, you know, the 17th century and then the end of the 19th century. There were a few changes, but it was not so dramatic that it would give someone a really hard time. They wouldn't be able to conceive what is happening, right? We'd actually have to go to 12,000 BC to give them a shock. And why 12,000 BC? Because in 12,000 BC was when we did the shift from an agriculture nomadic sort of society to a city kind of society, right? So you have to go back another 12,000 years to be able to give someone that experience of shock, right? And you can keep playing with this. You can keep going back, and the amount of time you have to go back just becomes bigger and bigger. So, right, if you were going to jump further back to a place where you're shocked out of your senses, you'd probably go back to caveman times, right, where they were just inventing fire. And that was their world, and they had this magical, amazing innovation called fire, right? And if you brought them to 12,000 BC, where they were agriculture and tools and plows, they probably won't know how to understand that, right? Now, you can all open your eyes. Thank you. So, if we take this going back in time, and instead if we project it forward today, there are two things that are happening, right? One is that the change that is happening is coming closer and closer, right? So it was 12,000 years, and then the time period between that heart attack inducing change, paradigm shift, that's becoming faster and faster. The second thing that's happening is that you've also got an inflection point of when those changes are happening, right? So it's not evenly distributed around those thousands of years. It happens in a short amount of time. And those are times of a lot of chaos. They're times of a lot of transition. Now, what does this have to do with sustainable mobility? This is Dr. Dario Hidalgo's slide. And this is talking about different sustainable mobility trends and sustainable transport trends and how they've been adopted. And so you can see that there are a number of trends that took a little while to grow, and now those trends are coming faster and faster. This slide ends, this ends in 2010. And I'm willing to bet that if we extended it another 5 years, the trends that we're seeing are actually coming, the curves are coming closer and closer together. So I want to talk about sort of change in a sector and what our experience of that sector is. So this is what progress looks to us, right? We're standing on a curve and we can see everything that's happened before us. And the change is incremental unless you're this unlucky person, right? And you're standing pretty much on that inflection point. So what does this feel like to be at this inflection point? I think there's sort of three things that happen at that point, right? One is that there are multiple attempts by different types of agencies, whether you're entrepreneurs, whether you're inventors and innovators, whether you're a company, whether you're governments, but there's a lot of trying out new models and trying to create new standards. The second is that these new models are actually creating a lot of threat to entrenched ecosystems. And the third is that the conversation on regulations is very tense. This is a news article in the paper from September last year, and this is the conversation currently happening around Ola and Uber in India, right? And it seems to me that they're sort of at the beginning of that inflection point where technology has become so much cheaper that we're starting to reimagine how transport is possible in a very different way. And we're having these issues today where the unions are struggling to understand, what sort of security will a shared economy type of model lead to? What does that mean in terms of people who paid for permits before? What does that mean for me as a person who doesn't have a permit but maybe wants to be able to give a ride to someone else? These are really difficult questions that we're grappling with today. Towards the end of last year, we did a survey of people who were using on-demand cabs, and we did a survey of some stakeholders in the ecosystem as well. And we find that actually the discussion is between two extremes. So one, we interviewed a bunch of cool cab taxis in Bombay. Cool cabs are the cabs that are blue in color, that have an air conditioner, and the ones that never go by any standard rate, at least in my experience, right? And we found that all of our cool cab taxi players said that their income had dropped really significantly, right? And it was actually a very moving conversation that my team had with them because they were really struggling to survive. On the other hand, when we did our survey of people who were using these services, we found that 70% of people that were using these services had enough income to be able to buy a vehicle, but just weren't buying a vehicle. So maybe they were delaying the purchase, maybe they felt they didn't need the purchase. We're not sure, right? These are new trends, yet they're still evolving in India. So I think we have today this need to protect people who were in the ecosystem before, and this other opportunity to change how we think about mobility in our cities. And as any sort of inflection point would cause, it causes a lot of tension in the ecosystem and brings about opportunity. Over the last year, we've been looking at how these trends have been evolving in India. We've looked at the taxi aggregators, but we've looked at a number of new trends that are emerging. So if you look at shared mobility and if you look at ride sourcing platforms, we're starting to see a lot of impact in terms of people choosing not to use their vehicle. We're seeing impact in terms of how people are perceiving mobility, seeing impact in terms of people in a lot of more developed cities in the US choosing to walk more because they've taken a cab and they know that that cab will be there for them whenever they want to stop walking. We're looking at a number of trends emerging in the commuter experience space as well. So looking at open data and companies that are using that open data to really transform how commuters are planning their day. You're not planning your day the previous day. You can on the go, depending on what task you have or what your ability is, make a decision on what mode you want to use. We're also looking at product innovation and new types of vehicles, new types of fuels, a lot of innovation in bicycling technology as well, which is, I think, one of the oldest technologies that we have around mobility, but that's changing. So we've been tracking all of these trends for the last year, and last year when we ran a competition for companies in this space, we found that the companies were actually really struggling at that point to find financing. Today, we're running a challenge this year again, and this year, out of the companies that applied to us, 30 to 40% of them had already raised funding, and pretty significant funding. So the question is not any longer around, is the market there, or is there a need for this? Or will people purchase these sorts of services? Do they see value in it? The question today is, how do we think about public transport, and how do we think about these newer models? Is it going to erode away the value that public transport has, and how do we ensure that that doesn't happen? Because public transport is a public good, and it caters to the lowest income as well. So these are questions that we're grappling with at this point. I wanted to just end the presentation with this slide. There's an article written in the New York Times that talks about all the hysteria around going driverless and having autonomous cars, and they were comparing it to what happened many decades back when we moved from carriages with horses to cars, and all of the hysteria that was around that. And just to highlight again, I think the opportunity that if we can proactively get in front of these trends as much as possible, even though that's hard, we can shape how they add to a sustainable city instead of sort of retroactively just trying to fix the regulatory problem. So, sure. Okay, well, I think Harsha Kumar is 5 minutes away, so does anyone want to maybe add to some of the points that I talked about? Any experiences that people have had in their particular sector? Dario, anything from you? Then I'm going to call on people.
You can do another exercise to like them.
They're already awake.
I think they're awake at this point. Yes.
In a developing country like India,
Yeah.
how wise is it to get in on a trend that is not that has not been the facts that have not been checked before?
Yeah.
How wise is it to get into it
Yeah.
where every penny counts in a country like India? That's my question.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just going to repeat the question. The question is, how wise is it in a developing country where every penny counts to push forward trends that are not proven yet? Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I don't have the answer to that. My thought process on this is that these trends are coming whether we like it or not. I think that if technology is the play, then that is something that has to be made a common denominator in the older forms of transport as well. So to give you an example, yesterday we had a regulatory roundtable discussion with a number of private entrepreneurs as well as the discussion. And the gentleman from the union in Bombay, he was talking about how he has put in a system in thousands of auto rickshaws in Bombay for them to be able to take payment on their mobile, right? And he talked about, look, I'm not against any private player coming in. Of course, there's a discussion of equal playing field, but I really need to get that technology into my union, right? So I think that there is something to be taken from these models. I think that there are unfair advantages, or you can call it different things. You know, some players are very well funded, and maybe government does not have that resource to put in, you know, make decisions that quickly. So I think but that is the challenge, right? That we are in a situation where there are a number of models evolving in the market that are not proven, that we can't put a stop to either. But how do we work with these different models in a way that it's actually moving us forward in terms of progress, rather than sort of taking us on a curve of not accepting the trend and then being forced to accept it with our hands tied behind our back. So, you know, I think there are a number of examples of companies, for example, like Kodak, that just refused to accept the fact that film would go out of style, right? And they held on to that, and they held on to that for so long that they pretty much lost out on that market, on that shift, right? And when they did try to catch up with that, you know, with the whole digital camera scenario, that had kind of moved on, right? Because now we're all on our cell phones with great cameras. The only people with digital cameras in the room today are, you know, well, the people who have been hired for that. No one else goes around, you know, carrying cameras anymore. So then you're constantly playing a catch up with that trend.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Yeah.
I think the question is not really about whether it has been proven outside or not, because we are in a different phase of development. That's fine, but I think if you look at, there are enough innovations which has actually been created and started from India. I'll give you a few examples, right? SMS. The adoption of SMS actually started, you know, in India and some of the other developing nations. Another example, BlackBerry. BlackBerry was actually used as a business mobile phone. India actually made it as a mass, you know, consumption. You know, the whole movement on app-based solutions, I think India is really rapidly moving. So it doesn't really matter whether it has been proven other places or not, but I think the question is how relevant that solution is in our context, and can it actually expedite the problem solving, you know? And of course, our problem sets are different in comparison to the developed nations.
So, you were talking about disruptions that have happened, and I would say there have been multiple disruptions that have happened in the past maybe a few years. So one was the introduction of aggregators, so the cab aggregators, the Olas and the Ubers, and very soon we've moved on to another disruption of bus aggregators. So what do you think the future holds, in the sense that, you know, like these guys are realizing that maybe the cab aggregator, I don't know, I mean, do you think that's the solution, or both can coexist, or what is the challenges, you know, I mean, where would they focus more investment? Because it's the same companies that are moving on to bus aggregator models. So it's like multiple disruptions in a very short span, you know. Yeah. So what do you think are like challenges, or?
Yeah. So I think that's great. I think that, you know, what's happening right now is that you have multiple attempts to create a product that is going to become the standard, right? So if you think back to how all of these different Internet Explorer, the browsers came about, right? You had your Netscape, I think, was sort of one of the first ones, right? And then you had a bunch of others, and then eventually you had Google come out. And right before Google, there was another one called Firefox or Mozilla. I don't know if you guys remember that. But there was a lot of this creation of standard, and that causes a lot of upheaval in any marketplace, right? And I think that is what's going on. The attempt that all of these companies, their ultimate goal would be to be able to take over language. So today when I want to do an internet search for something, I don't say let's do an internet search, I say let's Google it, right? And we've seen in multiple industries how that that language starts to change because of someone who's dominant, a dominant player, right? So when you say that Facebook like button, and that gets picked up and put, it becomes a standard, right? I think that's what a lot of these companies are trying to do at this point. We're still too early to understand what the model is going to evolve to become. I think, however, what becomes very interesting about companies like this is the data that they're collecting, and their ability to very quickly analyze that data and make decisions based on it, because they have that skill set and they have the budgets to hire people to do that. Yes.
What you said, you're saying that these companies are doing a lot of data analysis. My sense is that these companies do a lot of data analysis using big data, right? And big data is used by internet surfers based on what people surf in. What percentage of population in this country actually does this kind of net surfing, Googling or anything? And if the model is going to be based on data, which may be large numbers, you may have 10 crore Indians doing it, and it may be based on 10 crore Indians ka data. But how relevant it is to India? And then the thing that you were asking is that model which they are generating, and if they are saying they're generating based on data analysis, it's not actually relevant data for this country. So then how do we, and people are putting in money in that. And because it is on data, there is a tendency to say that it is authentic versus somebody who brings up a model which is not backed by data. And I mean, how people, particularly, and this question is not exactly to you, but to all people in the academic sector who tend to give so much of emphasis on data and particularly technology-generated data, that the other models, forget about government providing level playing field. Generally, the academics and the policy, not policy makers, but people who are suggesting to policy makers also tend to rely on these people. So then even people who are working with these models are not providing a level playing field to other people.
Anyone have any thoughts on that?
So, see, when we're talking about just a correction, I mean, the big data is not just about surfing data. Big data basically means that you have humongous amount of data which cannot be handled by a traditional technology. Now there's a technology which can handle literally unlimited data. Now the fundamental question is, there are enough problems, right? And especially I think urban space is a perfect example where if you want to solve the problem effectively, the ability to handle complex and large amount of data is very useful, right? Very simple example, we talked about urban expansion and all, right? You have, multiple data sets with various variables. Can you handle that and really see? Okay, so that's a key point, So I think cut here.
Hi, Harsha. Everyone welcomes you. So, thank you all for waiting. Harsha is the VP of product development at Ola. She's been very involved with them from the beginning to help them think about, what do customers want and how do you sort of evolve that model constantly. So I'm glad you were able to join us. I know you had a few problems getting here, so look forward to hearing you speak.
I think I'm the perfect example today of how messed up our infrastructure is. Very, very slow. And the map showed 15 minutes, and it took me around half an hour to get here. So anyway, I'm not going to be presenting any slides. I do have them, but I think I'll just keep it simple, casual, and short. You guys have been around for a while now, so and we're running out of time as well. So, well, we all know that infrastructure is the backbone for the growth of any economy. Ironically, the same economic growth also ends up crippling the very same infrastructure. And I think India is the perfect example of that at this point. And just to throw some light on it, picture this. Bangalore city produces 33% of India's IT exports. And a typical commuter who works in an IT company in Bangalore spends about 2 hours traveling every day. And those 2 hours basically amount to roughly $6 billion in a year. And $6 billion is about 7% of India's GDP. In $6 billion, you can travel to the moon and come back about 10 times. And that's the state of our country. So how did we get here? Maybe it is that we were just not cognizant of how fast we were urbanizing, right? It took us 40 years to add 230 million new people to Indian cities. And statistics say that it will take us half that time to add another 250 million. Maybe we just didn't spend on infrastructure enough, right? India spends roughly $17 per capita on infrastructure, whereas China, which is also rapidly urbanizing, spends about $117 per capita on infrastructure. Maybe we just didn't build roads fast enough. We need 2.5 billion square kilometers of roads to sustain our development. Maybe it's none of that. Maybe there's another side to it. Maybe it's just about utilizing the roads we already have a little better. So think about Ola, for instance, right? I mean, and I'm not marketing Ola here, I'm just using it as an example. But think about Ola, for instance, right? Every time we put a cab out there on the road, there are probably a few people thinking, I don't need to buy a new car because there's a cheaper mode of transport available. And imagine Ola Share. I don't know how many of you have tried it, but Ola Share is a product that allows 3 people who are going in the same direction to share one cab. That basically means there are 3 fewer cars on the road. That essentially means that there's less pollution, there's less congestion, and potentially fewer accidents. Imagine, well, you don't need to imagine, you've seen this, the Delhi odd even, right? I don't know what it did for emissions, but I think it definitely helped with congestion. But the problem in that scenario was there are a lot of people who didn't know how to get to work. The metro wasn't enough, the number of cars weren't enough. What do you do in such a scenario? India is a perfect opportunity at this point, at least, for the public and the private sector to work together, right? I fail to understand why carpooling is not legalized in India. I fail to understand why, if you give a lift to a random stranger to go somewhere, why can't you get paid for it? Why does your car need to have a yellow label on it, and why does it take so long for you to get a yellow label on your car? Singapore just last year legalized carpooling. You can actually get paid for giving somebody a lift, as long as your bill is calculated correctly. In India, we have companies like Ola and Uber who can not only match you with the right people, they can generate your bill accurately, and we have the safety and security measures to react if something goes wrong. And I fail to understand why we don't utilize these measures. And let's say as a country, if we change, let's say we do legalize carpooling, what next? How do we incentivize people to use such products? India is the fastest growing car market in the world. We're growing at 7% year over year. This is faster than any other country in the world. And given our infrastructure, I'm surprised that this is happening. So how do you incentivize people? Again, in Singapore, it costs you twice as much to own a car than it does in any other country, simply because of the taxes that they levy. In China, in some of the cities, the government actually controls the number of new cars that can come on the road. The only way for you to own a car is for you to participate in an auction or to win a lottery, to be honest. In the US, there are dedicated carpool lanes, which move faster than other lanes. And people are just incentivized to carpool to get on the faster lanes. We all know that during peak hours, most of the traffic is office commute traffic. So why isn't it mandatory for IT sectors and for private companies to provide shuttles for transportation? Why do people use their own cars to get to office? And why don't we incentivize them through better tax benefits to use these mass commute options instead of using private transport? I can go on and on about, I'm a technology person, so I can speak on and on about what's happening in technology and how There's smart cars coming up, and there's self-driving cars coming up, and the electric cars will reduce pollution, and how payments are just exploding, and how easy it will be for you to use one mode of transport to another and pay for them seamlessly, and your experience will be incredible. But the fact of the matter is, none of that means anything unless, as a nation, we learn to adopt and adapt to all the change that is happening around us. That's it from my side. Thank you.
So thank you all. Thank you, Harsha. I'd like to invite you all to the next session, which is at 7:30 in the Silver Oak Lawns, which is the launch of the Streets for All movement and the Karo Awards. Thank you all for a productive day, and see you at 7:30.